And welcome to a special Shakespearean edition of QI dedicated to and entitled The Immortal Bard. Strutting and fretting their hour upon the stage tonight are the two gentlemen of Verona, David Mitchell, Bill Bailey. The merry wife of Windsor, Sue Perkins. And Much Ado About Nothing, Alan Davis. So, let the trumpet sound. David goes. Nice. Sue goes. Bill goes. And Alan goes. He does. So, let's take to the stage, good gentles all. When David Tennant played Hamlet at the RSC, what did Tchaikovsky play?
What?
Tchaikovsky.
Tchaikovsky being the composer, Tchaikovsky.
Was he in the cast, Tchaikovsky?
He was.
Peter Ilyich.
Not Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky, the Russian composer. Another musician called Tchaikovsky. He was also a pianist, a rather startling and amazing pianist, actually. Most eccentric pianist.
Richard Stilgoe.
No, I've already told you his name. It was Tchaikovsky.
Tchaikovsky.
Are you saying that he played Richard Stilgoe?
Yes.
He blew into Richard Stilgoe and a noise came out the other end.
You're putting him in the past tense, so I am assuming he may have shuffled off his mortal coil.
To quote Hamlet.
To quote.
Or indeed.
And that will be the only quote. That's it now. I've blown all my quotes.
But you've done damn well. It's a good start. Yes.
So if he's dead...
He was dead.
He was so he's not alive.
Skull?
So he's a skull?
Yes, he played the skull. We don't have the real skull there, but that's what a skull looks like. He was a very passionate Shakespearean. That is the real thing there, was Tchaikovsky, and he bequeathed it to the Royal Shakespeare Company, asking that it be used in productions of Hamlet for the part of... Do you remember the character? Whose skull it is that Hamlet...
Is it Yorick?
Yorick,
Yes. Yorick,
exactly.
yes.
Poor
Alas,
Yorick.
poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio, fellow of infinite
Yes,
jest.
well, they went, alas, Paul, wait a minute, this is Tchaikovsky. He can play a tune on his teeth.
There was quite a bit of trouble. There were health and safety issues. There had to be a human tissue licence had to be ordered in order for him to appear on stage.
Did they cut his head off? I mean, presumably, so he's gone, when I die, I'd like my skull to be used by the RSC. But someo's got to saw it off and then rot it down a bit.
The funeral directors were rather loath to do this. They thought it might be illegal, but they had to get clearance. And David Tennant every day held it in his hand. Tchaikovsky would have been very pleased. That's what he wanted, after all.
Yeah.
There he is looking at it.
Look at that.
Yeah.
A tramp yesterday.
You hope they've had to dirty it up again.
Oh, they very much, yes.
So that's not just a bit of the guy that's still clean.
There's a little face still on there he's got to wash off.
It's a long time since I've seen Hamlet, but because it's such a well-known bit, you don't really question what happens in it. And it's an odd thing to do, to pick up a bloke's skull from a graveyard.
But someone who knew...
And then to sort of go, alas, I knew him well. Rather than going, I feel a bit weird having picked up his skull, because I knew him.
That's sort of what he's saying. He's saying, it's ridiculous. I knew this man. I would sit on his lap when I was a boy, and he's just... We're wont to set the table on a raw. And he looks at him and says, so where are your jokes now?
Yeah.
Not
so funny now.
It is one of the great contemplations of death and mortality. And it must be even weirder when you're doing it to a real person like that. David Tennant presumably knew the story that he was doing it to this chap who wanted it to be a symbol of death.
It's going to be like I'm a Celebrity, isn't it? Agents are going to get put their acts down to have their skulls used in that. Yeah, oh yeah, no, I'll get you your skull. You'll be in Shakespeare one day.
It'd be awful, wouldn't it, though, if for your whole life you'd wanted to be an actor and it hadn't really worked out, and so you bequeathed your skull and it was used in a major production of Hamlet, and then all the reviewers said, I don't know, Yorick felt a bit stilted. So it ruined that scene, really. Yeah.
Now, Leonard Bernstein wrote a musical based on Romeo and Juliet and set it in New York. What was it originally called?
Was it West Side Story?
It became West Side Story, but it was originally called...
East Side Story.
Yes! Originally, when they were working on it, in the late 40s, it was gangs of Catholics versus gangs of Jews down in the Lower East Side. And then 5 years later, as they were working on it, they decided they wanted Puerto Ricans against white gangs, and that was the
Catholics
low
would be
West
awful.
Side.
I mean, they just have to tap someone and they just... I wish I hadn't done that. I have to tell you, I feel awful now. And there's just 10 years of terrible guilt. Puerto Ricans a bit more feisty.
I think they are.
Yeah.
They are. Let's certainly admit that it worked.
Gay and feisty by the look of them. I mean,
Well, it's the world of the musical, isn't
Yeah.
it? It is showgirls all.
And, all the pipes have been airbrushed out of this photograph.
Oh, heavens above. Now, of course, West Side Story may be the best and certainly probably the best known musical based on a Shakespearean fable, but do you know of any others? Points going.
Points?
Oh, Kiss Me, Kate.
Kiss Me, Kate, yes, by Cole Porter, was based on...
The Taming of the Shrew.
The Taming of the Shrew,
Yeah.
exactly.
Is Cats based on Hamlet?
No. but, odd as that sounds, there is a stage musical playing in London at the moment that is based on Hamlet.
Is it Hamlet, exclamation mark?
No. There is Hamlet the musical, but this is a big West End musical based on a big movie that is the story of Hamlet.
Oh, not Spamalot.
Not
Shrek.
Spamalot, no. A young prince,
Oh,
born,
yes.
and he's not a human.
Oh.
What? He's not a human. It's E.T.
Thank you, audience! The Lion King is based on Hamlet. Did you not know?
At what point does Hamlet say Hakuna Matata?
What about The Tempest? What were they made of there?
Wicked.
The Perfect Storm. That's basically...
Speed 2.
Harold and Kumar get the munchies.
Well, no, there's Prospero's Books.
Oh, yes.
There's one, but there's another 50s rather classic sci-fi movie.
Oh,
The audience are really joining
Rip
in
one
now.
out.
Forbidden Planet.
Yes,
Or a
Monsters
working
from
title,
the-
Rip One Out.
Yeah. There was one based on the Comedy of Errors, a musical.
What happens in the Comedy of Errors?
Yeah,
Lots of...
there are two sets of identical twins.
Oh, God.
which is-
One of them's shipwrecked. Who's a girl? Who's a boy? I'm married.
twins.
Everyone's dead.
The Boys from Syracuse is the name of the musical.
Oh, OK.
Terminator 2.
No.
Shylock is sent back from the future to...
Oh, I've got my chain stuck in my ruff. Whoa. That was embarrassing. Yeah.
It sounded like it should sound rude.
And yeah,
You think about it. No, not really.
So, there we are. Now, what does Sigmund Freud, Mark Twain, Henry James, a loony from Newcastle, and the Holy Ghost have in common?
So...
Mark Twain, I know, had a link, but I don't know about the others. Who's sceptical about Shakespeare because he thought that Toff wrote it. He didn't believe that a normal boy from Stratford
that's
could write.
Right.
Could write
He
properly.
was what you might call exactly a Shakespearean skeptic, as were the others. That's to say, Sigmund Freud also believed that, and Henry James, and the Professor Looney, that was unfortunately his name, though I believe it was pronounced Loney, from Newcastle, who wrote a book in 1920 called Shakespeare Identified. There was this whole movement, started in the 19th century, really, with the idea that it might have been Francis Bacon who wrote the works of Shakespeare. There was particularly a woman called Delia Bacon, who was an American and was completely insane, really. She came over to England and wrote a 625-page book
God.
in which she didn't even mention the name Bacon. And then when she died, she claimed she was the Holy Spirit.
She claimed she was the Holy
Yes.
Spirit?
So the Holy Spirit, if she was right, also doesn't believe Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. So if Bacon was one candidate, there are two other main candidates.
Oh, hang on. What was it?
Marlowe.
Christopher Marlowe.
Christopher Marlowe is one candidate. But the most popular
Earl
one...
of Oxford?
The Earl of Oxford is, yes, indeed, Edward de Vere.
Is that Edward de Vere?
That's Edward de Vere.
Wow.
won't be happy
There's a
with
lot
that.
going on there, isn't there?
There is, isn't there?
How does he keep that hat on?
It's sort of Kate Blanchett with a moustache. It's intense.
But no, there are serious people. I mean, Freud liked the fact that he lost his father early on, like Hamlet, because, of course, he had an Oedipus complex theory about Hamlet, Freud, so he liked that idea. Who else? Looney invented a rather fanciful scenario because the Earl of Oxford died in 1604, and Shakespeare carried on writing plays many years after that. So
That might almost be the point at which to abandon the theory.
Yeah, you'd think. Instead of which he claimed that before dying he'd left a whole sheaf of plays and that his servant, Shakespeare, then just produced them one after the other.
Isn't the Tempest written sort of 4 or 5 years after he died? 6 years, maybe, even after he died, referencing sort of stuff of the time. So after De Vere's dead.
Yes, quite.
He probably just left insert topical gag here.
Yeah, that's right. But there are Mark Rylance and Derek Jacobi, both supreme actors, and they both believe that it was the Earl of Oxford. There isn't a shred of evidence, as far as I can see.
It sort of doesn't matter. On the basis that what Shakespeare means to people is the guy that wrote those plays. And so if the guy that wrote those plays is a different guy that wrote those plays, that's still what a great guy.
Yes.
It's not an earth-shattering conspiracy, really, is it? That
No.
perhaps it isn't him?
Over 5,000 books on the subject, incredibly. Yeah, I know, it's extraordinary.
But yet no scrap of evidence.
Not real evidence, to be honest. No, it's just speculation. And the odd thing is, they often say, well, we know so little about Shakespeare. There are very, very few people of the Elizabethan era about whom we know more. I mean, Ben Jonson, for example, who was a very famous playwright. We don't even know where Ben Jonson was born or how many children he had.
If other people were writing the plays, why didn't they say so at the time?
Well, quite. I mean,
That's the bit I don't understand. It always seems to go that he didn't write all that. Well, wouldn't it have come out if other people had written?
Yeah, but if it was Ben Jonson or any of those others, jolly good luck to them, I say.
Was it just because he wasn't posh? Does it just come down
That,
to
it's
basic
kind of
class
snobbery.
system?
They think, well, he was just this kid from Warwickshire and he was a woodlander, and but in fact, his father was a glover, which is a perfectly decent trade, as you say, and he went to the grammar school there, almost certainly. And
He's sort of, you'd think, exactly as far up the society as you'd expect a major writer to be.
Yes.
Not, it's not like now the best novels are written by the Duke of Westminster.
now, his vocabulary. How many words do you think he used? I'm not counting repeats. He used a lot, obviously.
Yeah. Dagger, murder.
This could take us a long
Wife.
time, yes.
Well, we've got to start somewhere.
You've got to start somewhere,
We've
you're
got to start
right.
somewhere.
Yeah.
5,000.
Yeah.
They're 20,000 words.
20,000.
20,000 words. And how does that compare to the average vocabulary of a Briton, will we say, roughly, that we know?
4 times as much.
No, half as
Half.
much. Half as much.
Less.
Surprisingly, yes. I mean, we're not saying that Shakespeare used every word he knew in his books. I'm sure he left lots out. I don't remember the word
He
clitoris.
didn't use
in any
hard
of
drive.
I think it's in the second folio.
It might be. So it's about half that of the average modern English person's vocabulary, because obviously he didn't have certain words to call on, like, texting or vajazzle or whatever. But on the other hand, he did have, guerdon and bodkin and fardel, which we don't use so much.
Yoghurt,
Yoghurt. I don't suppose Shakespeare knew what yoghurt was.
Broadband.
Broadband. Exactly. There are a lot of words. In The Sun, David Crystal, who's a well-known linguistic fellow, and he estimates that there would be about 6,000 words in any complete issue of The Sun, whereas the King James Bible has just 8,000. So this idea that we're all dumbed down to a lower vocabulary is not necessarily true. Anyway, moving on. Shakespeare coined over 1,000 new words, but not all of them caught on. Here are some of the ones that didn't. See if you can put them into a sentence for me. Swaltery, quatch.
Quatch.
I've got a sweltering quatch at the moment.
Already we're there, aren't we?
It happened when I put my kicky wickies on. The cock will be function. I've always been near-legged.
You're a boggler in those times.
I've boggled my Carlot.
You're foxing. What happened to cockled boggler?
Car lot, that's a thing. That's where people sell
That's a sexy
second-hand
garage.
cars.
Yes, well, that's true, actually.
It's just well
It has
ahead of its
taken it
time.
way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
A boggler is a very clumsy burglar.
Or it's a burglar that can't believe the stuff he's getting his hands on. Look at this DVD player.
Well, he used it to mean a hesitator, one who boggles. I don't know if that was in boggling the mind.
What is a kicky wicky? Is that like a Russell Brand's version of a football or something?
It's an affectionate term for a wife. Oh, my dear Kicky Wicky.
A kicky wicky is not an affectionate term.
Domestic violence is a lot more acceptable.
Oh, the old smashy washy. The old battery washery. Punchy wunchy.
And a quatch. Or is it a quatch? It's actually an adjective.
A fetch.
Quatch. Quatch means a bit podgy, a bit quatch.
Oh, you're a bit quatchy.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Luckily, I'm wearing a surgical truss.
Plump, shall we say. Whoppened, or wappened, is corrupt. That's never really caught on, has it? But look at the ones that did catch on. Here's just a small example of words that are first used in Shakespeare. Accessible, acutely assembled, barefaced, beguiling, critic, even-handed, eyeball, Frenchwoman, hunchbacked, neglected, overpowered, promising, radiance, revealing, rose-cheeked, schoolday synonymous, three-legged.
French woman is a bit of a stretch.
French woman.
He invented it.
Before
He
that,
invented taking the space out.
Yes, you may have done. Even-handed, bewitchment.
this is my
symbol.
wife. She is a thingamajig. I don't know. What can I call her? Oh, French woman. I think you're French woman.
Of course, you can't be absolutely certain he invented all these because they may have been in use before, but he is often the first printed source we have for them.
He presumably had to have a pretty good idea that people would understand what he was going on about.
Yes, exactly. Oh, I've done it again.
Oh, no.
You know, this bit of rough is not behaving. I've said that before. Oh, dear, oh, dear. So there we are. Call me a sweltery boggler if you like, but answer me this. How did Shakespeare's bottom get to Norwich?
Are there relics, bits of him?
Well, he had a famous comedian who played Bottom and Falstaff.
Who did?
Shakespeare.
Oh.
And he created them for him. He was well known. He was considered the funniest man in England. And his name is sometimes put, it says Kemp instead of Bottom on the original play script, because it was so obviously Kemp who was going to play him. Will Kemp, his name was. But he had a dreadful falling out with Shakespeare or with whoever was running the company, well, with Burbage or somebody, and he went off in the right half. But he decided, as a publicity stunt, he would Morris dance all the way to Norwich from London.
Oh. That's unnecessary.
He did it, it took him about 3 weeks, but he did it over the course of 9 days. And there's a famous phrase that comes from this thing that he did.
Cocking about?
No.
Making
he wrote a
right
book,
tit of yourself?
Kemp's 9 Days Wonder. It was a 9 days wonder. That's where the phrase a 9 days wonder comes from. And he just did it to draw up publicity to himself and say, I may have left Shakespeare Company, but I'm the man, and they're going to go down now. And unfortunately, quite the reverse happened. He went off to Italy and died in penury. His gravestone just says, Kemp, a man. And after he left, the first play Shakespeare wrote was Henry V, in which Falstaff dies off stage. So Kemp was kind of got rid of that way. And a new man called Armin came in and played the comedians. But while we're on the subject of Will Kemp there and his Morris dancing, let me ask this. What do you call a group of Morris dancers?
An arse.
Swarm.
Swarm.
An embarrassment.
Oh.
Plague.
A bell end.
A bell end. Honestly, poor old Britain. We've got one folk tradition in England, and all we do is laugh at
But
it.
it's absolutely true. People, it really generates hostility.
People
Morris dancing. And I think
so mean about it.
I think we think they're up to something.
It's charming.
A perv of Morris dancing.
I think it's very valuable that we can point to that and say, see, it's a free country.
We're not doing doing that in Afghanistan.
Yeah, really. If we were going to ban anything,
It would
we'd
be.
ban that.
You know what's going to happen? You see, if this scene now of all us dressed like this and this photograph here behind us like that is we're going to end up as like an "and finally" section on foreign news programmes. If you know more, Les Anglais.
It's known as a side, anyway.
Side.
A side, a group of Morris men. No one quite knows where Morris dancing comes from. We think it's from Morisco, as in Moorish, maybe a way to celebrate the expulsion of the Moors from Spain, various dances, and it's spread into England that way, but certainly not pagan and mystical and anything like that. It's pretty recent, 14th century is the earliest you can go back to it. There are 150 sides now registered in the USA. So American Morris dancing is taking off in a big way. That's 3 per state on average.
I've joined a bell end.
This is what they do in old England. Merry England.
There's an Arctic Morris group based in Helsinki. But now, time to visit that undiscovered country from whose bourne no idiot returns as we ring down the curtain on general ignorance. Sound drums and trumpets, farewell, sour annoy, for here I hope begins our lasting joy. Fingers on buzzers, in other words. What best describes, in one word, Richard III's appearance?
Hunchback!
There's no evidence at all that Richard III had a hunched back. Just the black propaganda of the Tudors who succeeded him.
But the character in the play does.
The character in the play does, certainly.
And a limp, a sort of arm, twisted arm, isn't he?
A bottled spider, one of the things he's called. A hideous name, isn't it? But no, it seems he was a rather decent fellow in many respects. Intelligent, kind. There was a man called Polydore Virgil, who was a historian who was determined to paint Richard III as black as possible, and so described him as ugly, because in those days they associated ugliness and so on with much as we do today, with wickedness. So, while on that sort of thing, how beautiful was Cleopatra?
She was minging.
I think it's sort of a bit weird looking, but sort of striking.
Yes,
she had a sort of
probably
bit of a
fair.
weird
Well,
nose.
Long nose, a long pointy nose. It seemed possibly she had a long pointy nose. There's certainly no contemporary suggestion that she was particularly beautiful. They do say she had a very beautiful voice and that she was very charismatic.
She seemed sexy.
She seemed sexy,
because she was
which I find is half the battle.
Her mouth is very small in that it only extends as far as the flare of her nostril.
Yeah, that isn't necessarily Cleopatra.
That's just a woman who's...
Artist's impression.
It's just a woman who's gone mad with some napkins.
Yeah. Yeah, she's gone serviette crazy.
Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety, as Barber said about her, I think. Now, how did Christopher Marlowe die?
Well, now.
Ta-da! Yes.
Let me say it so you can mock me. He died in a bar brawl being stabbed.
Dear me. No, well, he was stabbed, I'll give you that, but not in a tavern brawl. It was thought for many years it was a tavern brawl, but it wasn't until 1925 that the documents came to light in the Public Record Office that showed he was, in fact, killed at the house of a Mrs. Eleanor Bull by a man called Ingram Fraser, with whom he spent the whole day, and they had an argument over the bill.
An argument over a bill?
He stabbed him.
That's a bit harsh.
So I need a mineral water.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So it wasn't a tavern?
No.
What was it the bill for, then? Was it a restaurant?
It was a pop-up restaurant.
To call it a tavern, it was actually rather a smart restaurant, but it went downhill after that.
It might have been a prostitute.
Right.
Might have been a brothel.
Oh, so it could have been a brothel bill.
I didn't have that.
No.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have
To be honest, the service charge in this case is redundant.
I had one of them, two of them.
I asked for that, but it never happened.
I ordered it, but
It was off.
Yeah.
If we all chip in, we can afford that.
Why don't we just get one big one and all have a bit? Oh, I don't know. Oh, no, dear me. Anyway. Yeah, it's unlikely to have been a brothel, because he did say that he didn't trust anyone who didn't love tobacco or boys.
Well.
Anyway, what made Lord Byron limp?
That's a follow-up question.
Item 4 on the brothel bill. 8 hours of Morris dancing.
He had, from birth, a pronounced limp. L-I-M-P, pronounced limp.
So did he have a... They're not quite sure whether or not he had a club foot.
We know that, in fact, he didn't have a club foot. It's often said that he did, because that's the sort of one that people have heard of. He had a sort of withered leg, and you can tell from his boots. He was very athletic, and he hated this limp. But he swam the Hellespont, and he boxed, and he was very worried about his weight. He became possibly an early male anorexic, it seems. And he liked to spend money, did old Byron. He ordered batches of 24 a time of white linen trousers, which he only wore once. He also ordered silk handkerchiefs in batches of 100. Each one was 9 guineas, which was an average man's pay for the year.
So what was he... Was he coining it in with the writing?
He inherited at an early age the title and Newstead Abbey, which he spent very, very fast. But he was, in fact, incredibly highly paid, yes. For every canto of Don Juan, his last great masterpiece, I think. Yes. Thousands he got for each canto.
So he would write a canto,
he was
have a hankies, or
yes.
write another canto.
He was hugely successful, yeah. And
white linen trousers?
Yes.
Does that sound like something out of Miami Vice?
Doesn't it? He had to leave England because there was a scandal about him possibly having had sex with...
a young...
goat.
Well, a story at Cambridge. He kept a bear at Cambridge in his rooms, a bear. And the Master of Trinity said, the rules are absolutely clear, Lord Byron. There's no domestic animals. He said, I assure you, Master, he's not domestic, he's entirely wild. So he was allowed to keep the bear. But, there was a rumour that he'd shagged his sister, and so that's what forced him to leave.
So you're going to say the bear?
No, the bear. As far as I know, the bear...
Is that more horrific than shagging your sister?
Well, it's just different, really.
Yeah.
It is.
It is different.
It's probably braver.
Anyway, Lord Byron limped because of an abnormality in one leg, but it wasn't a club foot, in fact. Now, what can the Queen do that an idiot can't?
By the looks of it, kill people with their own eyes.
Doesn't look in the best mood there, I agree.
One tires of Morris dancing.
This is something she's allowed to do, but doesn't. But an idiot is not allowed to do.
Drive, vote.
Vote is the right answer. Most people think the Queen can't vote. She has every right to vote as any citizen. She's never exercised that, as far as we know. But idiots are not allowed to vote. And lunatics may only vote during their lucid periods. So
Test them on the way into the food.
So it's a surprise that most people think that the royals can't vote. They can, they just choose not to. But alas, alack, and well away, our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air, and we must consult the scores. Well, my gracious heavens. I'm afraid rather down the bottom of the list with -14, Bill Bailey. Probably. 4 to the better with -10, Sue Perkins. Second witch with a very creditable +3, Alan Davis. But tonight's Prince of Denmark with 6 points is David Mitchell. Well, it only remains for me to thank our dramatist personae, Sue, David, Bill and Alan, and to leave you with this perceptive thought from Robert Wilensky. We've heard that 1,000,000 monkeys at 1,000,000 keyboards could produce the complete works of Shakespeare, but now, thanks to the internet, we know that this is not true. Good night.
More comedy here on BBC HD this weekend, and a chance to catch up with Grandma's House at 11:05 on Sunday. Next tonight, it's Shooting Stars.